This Harris campaign, we've been watching the vice president today heading into Georgia, has been an absolute fundraising juggernaut over the last week plus. And there are all these calls they keep holding, Zoom calls and the like. And there was one that was actually a White Dudes for Harris call that they had last night. They had them every night, and that one brought in $4 million. So let's bring Kurt Bardella in, News Nation political contributor, Democratic strategist, and also Malik Abdul, Republican strategist, radio talk show host. So let's start with that, and I want to move on to some other developments in the campaign. Enthusiasm's one thing's great, right? Kurt's a big part of getting the vote out. How does it translate? Say, let's just use Georgia as an example. That's where she is today. Are states like that in play versus when Biden was in, Democrats felt like they had no shot? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, I think that it's an incredibly competitive landscape now, and especially in places like Georgia where Democrats have fared well, not just in the last presidential election, but in the special election that led to the reelection of Senator Raphael Warnock. We have seen continually Democrats outperform the polls. And now with the energy behind Kamala Harris, and we're seeing swings in polling, voters of color moving overwhelmingly in double digits in favor now of Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump. Tens of thousands of volunteers signing up, being activated, people who are going to sit on the sidelines. I think one of the most interesting data points that I saw was in that Fox News poll that came out on Friday. Yep. The double haters, voters who didn't like Biden or Trump, have now moved into Harris plus 25. That is a massive shift and just shows that the engagement level now is that much more higher. That is an interesting data point. Malik, what do you make of that? This whole idea that what was going on in the campaign, you had two old guys running for president. The country didn't want to vote for either one of them. Every poll showed it. It was like 7 out of 10. So one party switched. And now Kurt says the people who were in that camp who said we don't like either one, now they're breaking big time for Harris. Are the Republicans in trouble as a result? What's your take?
It remains to be seen at this point. Remember, just a few months, well, basically a month ago, we were saying that it was too early for polls when Donald Trump was leading Joe Biden in many of the polls, and he continues to lead Kamala Harris now. But it was too early for polls then. And then all of a sudden, within 3 days, we trust the polls. I think it's much too early. We'll have a better.
What I would say about that, just real quick, they're a snapshot, right? They don't tell us what's going to happen in November. They didn't tell us then. That. But they did tell us kind of what the race was like back then. Trump was ahead, and if the election, somebody said, let's have an election tonight, he would have won. And now they tell us it's close, right?
Yes, and I've consistently said then that those polls are snapshots in time, and so we should take it as that. I wasn't even critical of the polls then, but what I will say is that this is more of an optics thing at this point. Maybe we'll have a reset after Labor Day to see where the polling is, but we should expect Kamala Harris to have a very good week. She's going to name a VP, then she's going into the convention right after that. Right. So she should have a lot of good positive press going into the Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, and Trump did for a few weeks too. I mean, there was an attempt on his life, for goodness sake, but politically, he had a good convention up until, and then that changed, and maybe this changes too. No, I get your point. All right, let's talk about the Republicans for a minute. I thought it was interesting news right before we came on the air for our show today. This news came out that Project 2025, the person who's in charge of it, is leaving, right? And this is a whole thing that it's getting a lot of attention, especially from liberals who say this is a 900-page plan that the Heritage Foundation put together. That's how they want to govern. And Trump's been trying to distance himself, Malik, from this. And this is a statement his campaign put out when the leader of Project 2025 left. He says it's been clear for over a year the Project 2025 had nothing to do with his campaign, and on and on. So, Malik, you first on this, and if this is significant.
Well, what's getting ready to happen here is that Donald Trump has already reached out to the Heritage Foundation. Heritage Foundation will probably end Project 2025, and probably by the end of the year, they may have a new president. They went off the deep end. If you look at the book itself, when Kay Coles James was in office, well, she was the previous president of the Heritage Foundation. She actually published a similar outlook. About 75% of the that the Heritage Foundation has always stood for was in that book. The problem is the 25%, those woke issues that Kevin decided, the current president decided to fight. That's on Heritage, but I expected there to be some changes, not just with ending Project 2025, but with him himself. But Donald Trump is good. He's right to distance himself from this.
Well, for a couple of reasons. I think, number one, you said, and you're coming from the right side of the political spectrum, that they went off the deep end. So that's one part of it, maybe. But the other thing, Kurt, is I think Trump perceives this as he was some sort of a puppet, like these guys were out there telling him what to do. Hey, here's 900 pages, Mr. President, and when you get in there, you do what we tell you. And that I wouldn't think that rubbed him the right way necessarily. But what about from the Democrats? This was something you know Democrats were going after. I mean, does it take an issue off the table?
It really doesn't when you consider that dozens and dozens of people affiliated with Project 2025 were all affiliated with the Trump campaign at one point in time, some of them who actually work for the Trump campaign right now. It's kind of like Donald Trump is the last guy to know what his own people are up to, which isn't really the most compelling case to make when you want to say you want to be the chief executive of the country. But I think even more problematic for this Republican ticket are the positions of J.D. Vance, the extreme positions. There's a reason why he's scrubbing from his public websites any language that pretty much mirrors Project 2025 on women's rights, women's health, and abortion. Right. He is as extreme as it gets, and that has been a real boost for the momentum of Kamala Harris and a real problem for J.D. Vance. I don't think you've ever seen this contrast before of one presidential launch going as well as it did, while the vice presidential launch went about as badly as you could possibly have.
Well, a couple things on Vance, and we watched him rallying. We took in Nevada today. We took a little bit of that at the top of the hour when he was speaking. See the Harris event that's being set up in Georgia. A couple things on Vance. Number one, Wall Street Journal headline: he told donors that Harris coming into the race was a quote sucker punch at odds with the campaign. Apparently, Vance saw that, getting a new candidate as opposed to Biden was a sucker punch for the Trump campaign. And then the comments that he made, Malik, that have been a few years ago, they're getting so much attention about people, women who don't have children. And that really became a bigger story, I think, than a lot of people thought it would, to such an extent that when Donald Trump was interviewed, he tried to clean it up. Here's what Trump said about the childless cat ladies that Vance was talking about.
He grew up in a very interesting family situation, and he feels family is good. And I don't think there's anything wrong in saying that. But all he said is he does like, for him, he likes family.
Say, Malik.
Well, that Donald Trump was having a difficult time trying to explain it because it's a difficult thing to explain. Yeah. It reminds me of when people have conversations about education and they make accusations or suggestions that if you don't have children, then you can't necessarily know or be very powerful on education. This is some cleanup, but I will say that.
Is it hurting the campaign, do you think?
Say that again?
Is it hurting the campaign in a real way?
I think just initially, but he's the vice president. So at some point, the honeymoon for Kamala Harris will end and we'll stop finding these things about J.D. Vance. So it's going to even out at some point. And even when she chooses a vice presidential candidate, I think what's going to happen is that they're going to wash each other out because Kamala Harris nor Joe Biden nor right. Donald Trump is bringing experience to the vice presidential ticket. It's optics.
Final point, Kurt. Who do you think she picks? This is live, by the way. Harris in Atlanta with the two senators from Georgia, Warnock and Ossoff, standing behind her as she gets set for her campaign event. Who's she going to pick as her running mate, Kurt?
I don't know who she's going to pick. I'll tell you who I hope she picks. I personally think, and Malik alludes to this is about communication. This is about messaging. This is about articulating a message. There is no one more skilled in the Democratic Party at doing that than Pete Buttigieg.
Pete Buttigieg. Wow. That would be, he's the most known. He hasn't been talked about as much.
Not going to find any old interviews of him calling people cat ladies. He's been vetted already.
Well, I mentioned this the other day. He's a good campaigner. I remember covering him in New Hampshire and Iowa, and that, Harris had dropped out by then, but he's a very good campaigner. We'll see. All right. So we'll see what she does. I think here in the next few days. Kurt and Malik, thank you. Lots of vice president in Atlanta. In fact, we'll come back.